Dainty as her bouquet of flowers, Celine picks up a toy ambulance from her pristine lawn. Little does she know, her next-door neighbor, Alice, is discreetly watching her every move from behind her bedroom curtains. She rushes down the stairs just in time to catch Celine taking off from her driveway. Everything about Alice screams immaculate, so it's a complete mystery why someone like her is breaking into Celine's house using a spare key. The moment she's inside the warmly furnished home, she stealthily covers the windows with the flowery curtains. Now safe from prying eyes, Alice pulls out a knife from one of the drawers. Outside the entrance of an elementary school, Celine effortlessly projects the image of the perfect mom. She's soft-spoken, friendly with her fellow parents, and sufficiently involved in her child's education. Celine's here to pick up her son, Max, as well as Alice's Theo, who she gives the toy ambulance to. On the way back home, Celine happily sings along to "Did You Ever See a Lassie?" with Max and Theo, her eyes briefly straying from the road to clarify the lyrics with the boys. All the while, she lets her son embrace her while she's driving. They soon arrive home, and while Celine's telling the boys to wash their hands, she notices that something's off. She doesn't remember closing the curtains before leaving home that morning. Celine cautiously inches closer and closer toward the patio door, but when she draws the curtains back, she's surprised by familiar faces bidding her happy birthday, with Alice and her husband Simon leading in the center. A tearful Celine pulls Alice into an embrace, then she moves on to her husband Damien, who she thought was at a conference in Pittsburgh. The two share a very loving kiss before letting Max join in. The boy gets a lot of kisses from his parents, and he's happy to learn that Dad sold enough medicine to buy him a new toy. Simon's mother, Granny Jean, is also there, having baked the cake. As for everyone's gift, Alice presents Celine with a pearl necklace. The birthday girl gets even more emotional, and though she insists it's too much, a supportive Alice helps her wear it. Meanwhile, Granny Jean is pulling out a coin from Max's ear, delighting the two kids. She's about to take her heart pill with champagne when Alice approached her with a quizzical look. Jean assures her it's okay, and a hesitant Alice excuses herself as she sees Theo and Max scamper off. She looks for them in the garden, with Celine tailing her. Alice is worried since they have Max's cookies, but Celine assures her that Theo knows better than to eat them. Still, having just one could kill him. She keeps calling for Theo, and when she gets no response, Celine calls out that there won't be cake for the boys anymore. When the boys finally crawl out of their secret tunnel in the garden hedge, Alice grips Theo tightly while a chuckling Celine dusts Max off. After confirming that he didn't eat a cookie, she asserts that he must respond to her anytime she calls him. After Alice said her piece, Celine signals her to breathe out. When the worrywart calms down, she immediately apologizes to her son and showers him with a barrage of smooches. At a glance, Alice and Celine may seem like perfect reflections of each other, but they can be very different in their approach to life and motherhood. Their houses show this well. Celine's drapes have a bold floral design, while Alice's are plain and muted, safe. They're both very refined housewives, but Celine has an Audrey Hepburn grace to her. Elegant, but with an airy carefreeness that pours into her relationship with Max as she shirks away from overprotectiveness. Meanwhile, Alice is more taut and uptight in a lot of ways. She has a tendency to be overly cautious, and she gets jittery the moment her boy is even out of her sight. Still, they remain the best of friends, and their sons are too. They're like a big family in that idyllic suburb. Deep in the evening, the boys are snoozing upstairs while the adults party. Alice and Celine dance recklessly along with their husbands, huffing cigarettes and laughing their little hearts out. When the men are seated, they discuss the Kennedy administration, with both of them believing that Kennedy's too young and underqualified to be handling the country. He's just a kid, they both agree, while Alice urges them to give another round for the birthday girl. She soon takes Damien for a playful dance, all while discussing how Theodore Roosevelt was the best president America had at 42 years old. Her conclusion as a former journalist? Age has nothing to do with leading the country, so the two men shouldn't be too cynical about Kennedy. Still, Jackie's the one who'd be running things. While we're on the topic, Celine's Bob looks quite a bit like Ms. Jackie Kennedy's. Now, as for Damien's conclusion, with the way Alice pissed him off, she'd make a damn fine journalist indeed, earning a laugh from everyone. Simon then shifts the topic to the First Lady's pregnancy, adding that if he and Alice managed to have a baby by accident, then it'd be easy for them to make another one on purpose. His words make Alice's face fall, and instead of answering, she brings up Damien's comment about her being a journalist. Maybe she should call her boss up at the Gazette. Simon chuckles, and when asked what's so funny, he answers that there's a lot of pressure there, implying Alice can't handle a hefty workload. As Celine tries to defuse the situation by refilling Simon's glass and saying that she could handle the pressure, Alice storms out of the room and into the kitchen. Celine follows soon after to console her friend, who asks her, "Is it enough for you, this life?" With a pained smile, Celine admits that she would have loved a sister for Max, but she's content with what she has. On the other hand, she encourages Alice to pursue her career if it's her calling. She even promises to help her friend in any way she can, from babysitting Theo to helping with chores, anything, as long as Alice finds her happiness. Back at home, Alice chastises Simon for his insensitive comment about how easy it was for them to conceive, knowing that the other couple has fertility issues. Simon apologizes, and soon enough, the tension diffuses. He takes advantage of the amorous atmosphere and reintroduces the prospect of an addition to their family. Hearing these words activates a kill switch in Alice's head, prompting her to smoke. Simon wonders if this is about Celine, but Alice refutes this. Celine was happy to stop being a nurse after all. Realizing what this is really about, Simon asks his wife why she even wants a job. He's head of accounts now, so he makes good money. With a pleading look in her eyes, Alice confesses that she wants to work again. Unfortunately, all her husband tells her is that if she really wants to be a reporter again, she can write for the school paper. Despite her heartbreak, Alice doesn't say anything and continues smoking. No matter how perfect their suburban Eden looks from a distance, the disenchantment is just bubbling underneath the surface. While Alice is happy being Theo's mother, she wants something more out of her humdrum life, where she spends much of her days looking after the two men in her life, facilitating their needs while they seize their day. She even tried to find an ally in Celine, but her discontent comes from the other side of the spectrum. She wants more children than she can have. Yet neither of them is able to do anything. Celine can't fight against biology. Alice can't fight against the structure, where her husband will always have the final word. And right now, his word is disregarding her aspirations and how belittled she feels. Even his suggestion ties Alice to Theo, so no matter what she does, she will always have motherhood looming over her. Still, even though Simon has his own self-motivated reasons for not wanting Alice to work, perhaps he wasn't being entirely disingenuous when he cited pressure to discourage her, if her nervous disposition towards Theo is anything to go by. The next day comes, and Celine informs the family that Max won't be able to join Simon and Theo to school as he's sick. After her boys leave, Alice decides to tend her rose bushes, but something soon catches her attention. It's Max, standing on their balcony's guardrails to hang his birdhouse on a tree. The panic kicks in, and she desperately yells at Max to go back inside to no avail. Try as Alice may, she can't crawl through the secret tunnel, which is the hedge connecting their house. So instead, she rushes to Celine's house, but her shouts are muffled by the noise of Celine's vacuuming. Alice barges in and storms up the stairs to get Max, while a confused Celine follows behind her. Unfortunately, they're too late. When Celine realizes this, she wails before frantically rushing downstairs. All she can do now is cradle Max's body in unbridled grief, gently lulling him as if he were still there with her. That night, Alice and Simon offer their condolences to Damien. The man is lost and broken. He embraces Simon tightly, but in the end, he bars them from seeing Celine. From Alice's bedroom window, she can see her friend wallow on the ground in her grief, and her heart breaks with each wail from Celine. Come next day, the somber parents deliver the news to Theo. Max is dead. When asked if he understands what that means, the boy asks if it means they'll bury Max in a hole and they'll never see him again. They're taken aback by how calmly he's taking the news, but Theo's hand is suddenly firm around his favorite stuffed bunny. They let Max skip school that day, and Alice notes how unbothered he seems. Simon, however, reminds her that grief manifests itself in different ways. Once he leaves for work, Alice finds the house completely empty. Intuitively, she makes her way towards Celine's garden, where she finds the bereaved mother consoling her son. Alice calls Theo back over, and at the same time, she tries to reconnect with Celine, but the woman only shoots her an unpleasant look before walking away. The more time passes, the guiltier Alice feels. She failed to save Max, and it's eating her alive. Simon tries to comfort her all throughout, and before they can go to bed, Theo barges in. He wants to retrieve his stuffed bunny from Celine's garden, but since it's already late, his parents invite him to snuggle with them instead. Still, a good night's sleep wasn't enough to clear Alice's conscience. Throughout Max's funeral, she remains uneasy, especially after making eye contact with a grieving Celine. Damien could barely deliver a eulogy for his son, and after that heartbreaking display, it's time to have one final look at Max. When Theo looks inside the open coffin, he suddenly falls into hysterics as he sees his stuffed bunny beside Max. He tries to take it, all while shrieking repeatedly that the bunny is his. Everyone's attention turns to them, and Simon immediately carries him out, with Damien glaring with contempt and Celine breaking down further. Outside, Simon angrily shames his son for what he's done, but Alice defends her boy. It was his toy and Celine knew it, so she shouldn't have done it. After some time, Alice watches from her window as Celine is being taken to a car. She doesn't seem willing to go as she keeps turning around, but Damien's already placed her luggage in the trunk, and Celine's ushered inside. Alice can only nod in understanding before turning away. 1 month later, Celine unexpectedly shows up at Max's old elementary school, bringing a basket of goodies. But after catching a glimpse of Theo, she instantly falls unconscious. When she comes to, Alice is there. For the first time since Max's death, the two finally talk, and Celine apologizes for pushing Alice away. Her memory's really foggy, but she's ready to mend their fragmented connection. She then urges Alice to watch the recital, and Celine is left to listen to the distant sound of voices singing, "Did you ever see a lassie?" by herself. She weeps again. That night, Alice, Simon, and Theo head to Celine's abode for dinner. Grief turns Celine into a shell of her former self, and now she's a shaky pillar that could crumble any time. But she puts on an unperturbed front, even after Damien yelled at her upstairs for insisting that he go down. Though Alice and Simon are disconcerted by this, Alice believes they need to be there for them. Celine brings out Bunny, and profusely apologizes to Theo for taking his toy without permission. She just didn't want Max to be alone. The two share an embrace, with Alice watching on with an unreadable expression. As much as Alice wants to help Celine, she will always be a mother to Theo first. Celine lost her son. Theo lost his best friend. They're each other's strongest connection to Max, so despite their age difference, they can understand each other better than anyone else can understand them. At least that's how it may feel to the two. Perhaps that's where Alice's problem lies. Grief can change a person until they're a stranger to themselves. It can change the way their mind works and alienate them from so many people. Celine might develop an unhealthy relationship with Theo, or being around him could do her more harm than good. After all, motherhood was everything to her, and without Max, she's completely lost and bereft. But maybe, underneath Alice's genuine concern is that tiny germ of jealousy. She saw the way Theo dismissed her and Simon when he learned of Max's death, but within those same minutes, he found Celine, and they found each other in an embrace. It might be no coincidence that after seeing that, she didn't give Celine any grace when Theo broke down over Bunny being in Max's coffin. Could Alice be jealous that Celine managed to tap into something in Theo and his grief that she, his mother, couldn't? Alice is helping Celine prepare the cocktails when Theo asks her to bring Simon a matchbox. With his mother gone, he asks the woman if she'll have another baby. This is, of course, a sore spot for her, but she smiles through it and gives the same answer she once gave Max. The doctors saw that there was something broken in her, so they had to fix it. And after that, they said that Max was going to be her one and only baby. To this, Theo asks if she bled while she was broken, but luckily, Alice arrives to hush the boy. Later in the evening, Alice walks upstairs looking for a bathroom, but she unexpectedly stumbles upon Max's old bedroom, which has become Simon's den. It has the man's ashtray, his food, his alcohol. As she hurries out, she's intercepted by a very messed up looking Damien, who corners her and asks if she misses his son. He embraces the uncomfortable woman, and when she outright says she does, he recedes into the room and closes the door shut. The two ladies are later smoking on the balcony. The mood is somber, and they're going through their cigarettes quick. Celine shakily shares that Damien blames her for the tragedy. He doesn't say it, but she can see it in the way he looks at her. A sympathetic Alice tries to advise her to take things slower, but she admits that if she takes things slow, she'll cease. In an attempt to make Celine feel better, Alice recounts the death of her parents. She's the only survivor of the car crash, and she always felt like she should have done something. That's when the anxiety started. She thought she had a handle on it, but it all collapsed when Theo was born. She couldn't even hold him for months for fear of dropping him. Alice was made to see a psychiatrist, and she spent some time in a hospital. Afterwards, she learned to separate the grief from the guilt. "What guilt, Alice?" Celine coldly asks. To her, their situations are incomparable. Alice was asleep in the backseat of a car accident while she was not watching her child. She failed Max. Without him, Celine doesn't finish the thought. She cries, and Alice can only take her in her arms. The next day, after Alice and Theo arrive home from school, Celine requests for some of Theo's time as she has a surprise for him. Alarm bells ring in Alice's head, but she concedes, allowing Celine only 1 hour with the boy under the guise that he has schoolwork. Plus, Damien's away for a conference. As Alice tends to her plants, she is jolted by a sudden, stomach-turning wave of déjà vu when she spots Theo on the balcony of Celine's house. This time, she manages to scramble through the hedge tunnel, shouting at her son to get inside. Celine appears, unsure of what's wrong at first, but when Alice incredulously pointed out that she let her son on that balcony, Celine grows frantic and apologetic in realization. Her words, however, are silenced by the sight of the tunnel entrance. That night, an unsettled Alice tells Simon of her suspicions. Celine was testing her. The woman believes that she should have been able to save Max, and now, she saw that Alice was able to crawl through the tunnel, something she couldn't do for Celine's child. Simon, however, places no trust in Alice's speculations, and instead proposes that it's all in her imagination. He carefully adds that it's dangerous of her to believe in these things, so Alice puts on a defeated smile. "He's right," she says. God knows she gets carried away sometimes. It's near impossible to tell whether Celine also blames Alice for Max's death, as the blonde suspects. For one, Celine's deep in the throes of her grief, and now, it's revealed that Alice genuinely has a strong, anxious disposition. The story's being told mostly from her perspective, so she very well may be an unreliable narrator. But it's also possible that this tidbit is a red herring to lull the audience into looking at Alice the same way everyone used to look at neurotic women from that time period. Unreliable, untrustworthy, and not believable. Take her husband, for instance. This is an assumption, but it looks like Alice doesn't want to risk arguing too much about him over this, lest she wants a repeat of her stay in the hospital. At breakfast, Alice is catatonic as her sisterly bond with Celine is beginning to unravel. It's only when Theo points out she hasn't prepared breakfast yet that she comes to her senses. She asks her son who he wants to invite to his birthday party, and of course, the answer is Celine. He doesn't care about the other kids, but Celine's his friend. Oh, and maybe Granny Jean too. When his birthday comes, Theo's just standing there, watching the other children play happily. Celine is behind him too, a figure drenched in black amidst a colorful assemblage. Even in Theo's special day, the two are mourning. But when the boy turns around to face her, they share a smile. For that moment, things feel all right. Celine notices Alice's cold treatment of her, but that doesn't stop her from trying to remain uncomfortably close to their family. She even takes on the task of bringing in Granny Jean's tea. Now alone, Jean politely implies that it isn't best for Celine to be there, so she reasons that it helps her a lot, being there. However, Jean maintains that this isn't what's best for Celine or her family. This is Theo's day after all, so it should be a happy occasion. With a stiff smile, Celine excuses herself and brings some used plates for Alice to clean. Her best friend's coldness finally has Celine cracking, and she asks if she's done anything wrong. So Alice finally asks if she was testing her the other day. Speechless at first, Celine quietly asserts that she's just looking out for Theo. Can't Alice see? He's like a ghost without Max. How could she do something like that to him? and to her own best friend. With that, Alice apologizes to Celine, both for accusing her and for not saving Max while getting to Theo on time. While Alice is washing the dishes, she observes Granny Jean in the garden, shuffling in a strange manner with her cup of tea before plummeting to the ground. Alice rushes outside and frantically calls for help, so Celine runs to her aid. Unfortunately, Jean is already dead. At the hospital, Alice learns that Granny Jean had a heart attack, which boggles her mind. The woman took her pills regularly. The doctor also confirms that her medication was highly effective and should have kept her healthy, reigniting the smolders of Alice's suspicions towards Celine. In her desire to discover the truth for herself, she pretends that Simon requested an autopsy. Upon arriving from the hospital, Alice catches Theo and Celine fixing Max's birdhouse, which Alice quickly confiscates while Celine quietly explains that he insisted on doing it. Setting that aside, Alice consoles Theo. She's quite pragmatic with her approach, telling him to be strong and remember the happy times with Granny Jean. Alice adds to this, saying that Jean's with Max now, and she's probably showing him new magic tricks. More importantly, they're in a better place, and her words of comfort make Theo smile. Later that day, while Alice is doing some gardening, she finds Granny Jean's pillbox that she dropped during her fatal heart attack. It's here that Alice remembers that Damien works in pharmaceuticals, and she comes to a far-fetched but haunting conclusion. Celine swapped Jean's pills for a placebo. If Celine wanted to take her revenge by slowly but surely targeting members of Alice's family, her best strategy would be to target the physically weakest first, making it look like a death from natural causes. With that, she decides to hide the pillbox and have the medication contained inside tested for a future date. That night, Alice awakens to a pounding noise from downstairs. Upon discovering that Theo's not in his bed, she rushes into Simon's room, screaming that their child has disappeared. To her surprise, Theo's right there, sleeping alongside Simon, and the disbelieving man dismisses her outburst as typical paranoia. The next day, Alice receives the results of the autopsy. There was no heart medication in Jean's bloodstrain, which gives her far-fetched hypothesis some wheels to stand on. Moreover, she can't find Jean's pillbox that she stowed away inside her bedside drawer. With all these oddities mounting on top of each other, there's only one conclusion for Alice to come to. The clattering she heard last night was Celine, and she stole the sole piece of evidence that could incriminate her. Celine and Damien invite Alice's family to dinner, and Alice reinforces extra caution when it comes to interacting with her neighbors. She scrupulously observes how the cookies Celine's just served have peanuts in them, and immediately blocks Theo from taking a bite. Alice also prohibits her son from entering the kitchen, but Theo's hungry, and looks to his dad for validation. Strangely enough, when Theo touches Damien's knee, he jerks up as if attacked with a taser, but he dismisses his jittery behavior as not wanting to burn the boy with his cigarette. Simon decides to propose a toast to their friendship, thanking Celine's family for being there for him and Alice, even through their loss. But before any of them can take a sip of their drinks, Theo's distressed cries from the kitchen instantly catch their attention. Crumbs of peanut butter cookies on the floor serve as the telltale sign that Theo's experiencing asphyxia. Alice and Simon rush their son to the hospital, and a few minutes later, Celine and Damien catch up to them. However, Alice enters a blind rage and begins clawing apart Celine's hair. In her mind, Celine's really out to get her family, from Jean's death to Theo's allergic reaction. When Simon drags her away to somewhere more private, Alice hysterically tells him that Celine was the one setting up every adversity they encountered after Max's death. When Alice opens up about the pillbox and the autopsy she had done on her mother-in-law, Simon wordlessly pulls her toward their car and takes the pillbox from the compartment. He discovered it in the garden, exactly where his mother dropped it. Simon thinks that Alice has completely lost her marbles, and he's unconvinced by her raving allegations. Plus, he can't believe she would order for an autopsy without consulting him. Alice feels that she's being gaslit, but she remains firm in her beliefs. She clearly remembers finding the pillbox and stashing it away in her drawer. Inside Theo's hospital room, the doctors confirm that they were able to neutralize the boy's allergic reaction. When Simon asks why his son ate the cookies, fully aware that they could endanger his life, Theo responds with a silent shrug. At home, Alice proposes to Simon that their family move someplace else, but Simon angrily suggests psychiatric help before walking out on her. Again, it was Simon who suggested Alice talk to a psychiatrist and spend time in a hospital when she experienced postpartum depression that was exacerbated by memories of her parents' demise. It's natural, if not expected, for him to reject everything Alice is saying about Celine. He doesn't want Alice to spiral down the same path as before, but instead of his unflinching apathy towards his wife's emotions, taking the time to actually understand her is more productive. While Alice is tidying up Theo's room, she spots Celine getting into her car and encounters a eureka moment. History repeats itself once more as Alice trespasses into Celine's household, but this time, to investigate. She saunters down the basement, immediately spotting a medicine cabinet mounted on the wall. But before she can probe further, she hears the sound of Celine re-entering the house. She finds the duplicate set of keys left by Alice on the tray, and, upon detecting some noise from the basement, walks downstairs. While she doesn't search for Alice in the basement, she's already aware that somebody's in her house, thanks to the light switch wobbling persistently on the ceiling. Thinking that the coast is clear, Alice makes her way back upstairs, but she's caught red-handed by Celine. Alice isn't gifted with the ability to lie on the spot too, and she mindlessly blurts out that she's looking for Max. Stuck at a dead end, Alice decides to confront Celine about Granny Jean's heart pills. Celine is infuriated at Alice's accusations, and she denies that she had anything to do with Jean's death. She then retreats behind her grief over Max's loss and soon orders Alice to leave. Later on, Alice suggests to Theo that they take a long vacation together, maybe at the ocean where they can fly a kite and roast marshmallows, but her son's completely uninterested in her attempts to show affection. Meanwhile, a mere present from Celine on their porch elicits the exact opposite reaction. Alice hurls the gift back at Celine's residence, demanding she leave their family alone. In his anger, Theo storms off inside the house, and Alice loses sight of him. She sprints toward her neighbor's house, and inside, Celine denies that Theo's nearby. However, they both hear a rumbling noise from upstairs, leading them to the boy standing on the balcony guardrails. He's going to jump so he can be where Max and Granny Jean are, a place where no one will be fighting or yelling at each other. Theo turns to the distraught women and reminds them of what Celine said. It's a better place, right? She urgently pleads with Theo to get back to safety, apologizing for her own shortcomings and assuring him that she won't be fighting with Alice anymore. Fortunately, Theo falls into Celine's arms, and Alice immediately embraces the two of them. Theo's safe, but an air of helplessness still weighs heavy on them. That night, Alice agrees with Simon's proposal that she needs help, and he reveals that he found a new house that their family can rent. She's right. Moving out would be ideal for Theo. Sometime later, Alice and Celine have a heart-to-heart talk, with Alice apologizing to her friend for her accusations, and Celine revealing that she did, in fact, blame Alice for Max's death. What's done is done, but Alice's family will be moving out in 2 weeks, all to try and safeguard Theo's peace. The two friends share an emotional hug, as they both admit that they can't keep going like this. Inside Celine's oppressive home, Damien makes terse conversation with his wife, who gives him his drink. She reveals that their neighbors are moving out soon, and the man scoffs in dry amusement. Can't blame them. After all, Celine's been clinging to Theo ever since. He bitterly adds that it was so easy for her to forget his son, which Celine sharply corrects. Our son, she curtly reminds him. In response, Damien merely demands that she leave the family alone, and he doesn't want to see that boy in their house anymore. That night, Alice and Simon are making love as she finally agrees to have another child. As for Celine, she's finally revealed her true colors. She mercilessly chloroforms her husband and slices his wrist. Of course, she cleanly positions the weapon in his palm to make it look self-inflicted. It looks like Alice has become a victim of the Cassandra complex. She's been correct about Celine having sinister intentions afoot, but her accusations were disregarded as mere speculation fueled by her jumbled mental state. With Celine left unchecked, she was able to end her husband's life, the third person who directly opposed her unhealthy relationship with Theo. And now, there's only one person left on that list. After the cops have been called about the incident, Alice invites a devastated Celine to stay in their spare room. When Simon arrives from work, she takes Theo upstairs to ready him for bed. He wants to bid goodnight to Celine, but his mother insists that she's already asleep. Alice heads downstairs to find Simon watching television, and she mentions that Celine hasn't left her room all day. Despite the turbulence their friendship went through, the couple mourns Damien. Simon even says he should have seen it coming since he knew Damien was hurting, but Alice replies that they should take it easier on themselves. The fact that they'll be moving out soon consoles them, although, in their eyes, it's disheartening that Celine won't be able to go back home, not after what's happened. At that moment, Alice decides to grab some things from Celine's house, reasoning that their guest didn't bring anything with her. Meanwhile, Theo fails to heed his mother's request and enters Celine's room. There's nothing but cold, psychotic wrath written all over her face, but she still manages to have a calm conversation with Theo. As Alice turns on the lights in Celine's home, she's taken aback by the bloodstains on the rug in Damien's room. Upon browsing through Celine's wardrobe, she finds the key to the medical box down in the basement, and once she opens it, Alice is horrified by the sight of chloroform inside. At this point, she realizes that she was right all along. Meanwhile, Celine has already sedated Simon and Theo. After returning home to an unresponsive Simon, Alice carefully makes her way upstairs, clutching a metal trophy in her hands. Unfortunately, Celine ambushes her from behind, and they get in a rough scuffle. Celine is frantically trying to block Alice's airways with her chloroform-drenched cloth, but the blonde manages to free herself from her grasp. She hits Celine over the head, knocking the madwoman down. As Alice crawls toward Theo's bedroom, Celine regains consciousness and watches as Alice takes her son into a final embrace. There's no escaping now. Celine places the cloth over Alice's face with little resistance from her victim. Now, she's ready to exact her ultimate revenge, disconnecting the household boiler and staging a gas leak. Afterward, Celine immediately gets to work erasing any pieces of evidence linking her to her crime, positioning Alice and Simon to make it look like they were watching TV when the leak happened, scrubbing the kitchen cups until they're squeaky clean, and picking up the pearls of her necklace torn apart during her tussle with Alice. With that, Celine spares Theo by placing a towel under his door, preventing the toxic gas from entering his room. In the wake of the tragedy, Celine is in court, held to discuss who gets to take custody of Theo. As the boy does not have any surviving family members, the judge wants to confirm whether he accepts Mrs. Jennings to be his adoptive mother. Theo asks if Mrs. Jennings is Celine, and when the judge says yes, Theo nods in response. Celine walks alongside the ocean with her new son, asking what he'd like to do. Maybe he'd like to build a sandcastle or fly a kite. Neither of them seem happy at all, but but Celine forces a smile as she assures Theo that after all the tragedies they've experienced together, eventually they'll manage to shrink the big holes of loss carved in their hearts. She lets the boy run around and play, and though Celine is looking on with a pained expression at first, she playfully chases after him, spending time by the ocean, flying kites. These were exactly what Alice proposed she and Theo do together on vacation before. Celine has completely replaced not just the role of Alice in Theo's life, but Alice herself as a person. For instance, the round earrings she's wearing, which match her royal blue dress, are the same earrings Alice frequently wore. As for Theo, he will be Max's replacement. But no matter what Celine does, she knows that she can't replace Max. She remained bereft until the very end, and she wears it on her face. Celine may have killed everyone who stood in her way, but was Theo really worth it? Did she really need him? It's hard to see her victory as anything but hollow, and she'll be spending her life filling the hole in her heart with the wrong shape.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.